I carried my diner coffee into the garage when a boy in a polo shirt blocked the light. He said the HOA ordered me to hand over my uncle's cabin keys for overnight remediation. They thought silence meant surrender, but my cousin the prosecutor turned that notice into a court order that froze their assets. That humiliation was only the first step. Let me take you back. The boy in the polo didn't knock. He skimmed past the porch swing, stepped into the wash of my garage light, and lifted a clipboard like a badge. Sir, I'll need the keys to your uncle's cabin. HOA order. Effective immediately. Keys. I held my polishing rag in the air like that might count as a pause button. What order? He tapped a plastic sleeve. Overnight compliance. Section 4.2.7. Hazard remediation near the lakeside path. It's a cabin, not a hazard. Non-compliant accessory structure, he said, smooth as a script. Tonight's window applies. The chrome caught my breath in the slant of sunlight, and for a second all I saw was myself, small in that mirror, rag dangling coffee cooling on the bench by the socket set. Dust motes drifted like slow snow in the beam. Somewhere behind him, the porch swing creaked metal chain answering the morning. Let me see the notice, I said. He slid a paper from the sleeve. HOA letterhead. The words overnight remediation were bolded like they were proud of the hurry. This was never served, I said. Posted at the clubhouse, he said, per covenants. Posting on a bulletin board isn't service, I said. Where's the signature? He smiled as if signatures were a quaint hobby. You can surrender the keys voluntarily, sir, or we can proceed with removal and storage. My uncle's cabin isn't a lawn chair, I said. Non-compliance is non-compliance. I winced at the legal tone in a teenager's mouth. What's your name, Ty? His lanyard flashed. Volunteer compliance representative. Volunteer, I repeated. And you're collecting keys to a man's property. Per the board, he said. I don't write the bylaws. Lucky break for the bylaws, I said. He glanced down the drive toward the quiet road. Nothing moved out there, just sunlight sliding over the hedgerow that cut the back lot from the public right-of-way. A tiny orange cap poked out of the dirt where an old survey stake ought to be. The boundary pin leaned a hair enough to bother a retired postal clerk who still likes things square. Who told you to come into my garage? I asked. Formal notice, he said, tapping the page again. It authorizes approach. That word doesn't mean walk in, I said. He looked back up calm, like a lamppost. Keys, sir. Let's call the board, I said. No need, he said. We're on a timeline. I reached for my phone anyway and thumbed Uncle Harold. It rang long, then clicked over to the tin roof sound of his voicemail. I hung up and fanned the notice on my palm. The paper smelled like it had just spit out of a printer. The footer listed Attachment TTRO Draft. Draft. Not signed. Tonight, I said, reading the block letters. Why tonight? Remediation window, he said. Less traffic. Safer. Safer for who? For everyone, he said, smiling like an exit sign. Step outside, I told him. We're going to look at something. He followed me to the hedgerow where the lawn thinned to wild clover. I crouched and touched the orange cap with 2 fingers. The pin was scuffed new soil fluffed around its collar. Did you or your board move this, I wouldn't know, he said. That line matters. We rely on plats, he said. Then we'll visit the post office Monday, I said. They've got the county plat book under glass. We'll look at the real lines. Sir, I lifted my phone and snapped a photo of the pin, the hedgerow, the cabin roof peeking beyond trees. The shutter sound clicked like a little clock punching a card. Timestamp, I said. Angle from the pin. We'll see what your setback fantasy looks like after coffee. Sir, I've been courteous, he said. This is your opportunity to comply, by giving you my uncle's keys. Per the board, he said again. You keep saying the board? I said, is the board in my driveway? He didn't answer. The porch swing creaked again, tired as a breath. I walked back into the garage and pulled a milk crate from under the bench. The old folder slid forward, cardboard edges softened by years. The embossed seal on the first page had the faint raised feel of a good handshake. Harold kept everything, even receipts for nails. Here, I said, not handing it to him, just letting the seal catch the light. This proves chain of title. We'll confirm with the county clerk. He shrugged. Covenants run with the land. And covenants don't bulldoze deeds, I said. You're escalating, he said the way someone might observe a cloud. Not yet, I said. Right now, I'm polishing. My rag had fallen earlier. I picked it up and folded it into a neat square I didn't need. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing my hands shake. Keys, he said one more time. No, I said. He held my gaze like he'd been graded on it. Then you understand, remediation will occur. You've said the word a lot, I said. Maybe it'll start meaning something if you believe hard enough. We'll be done by morning, he said. Minimal disruption. Minimal, I repeated, staring past him to the lake light slipping between branches. That cabin's been standing since we were patching mail with tape after winter storms. Times change, he said. People change too, I said. They get careful. He slid the notice back into its sleeve with theatrical neatness. Sir, I'll record your refusal. Spell my name right, I said. He nodded like he'd been planning to. Then he took one small step toward the threshold, paused long enough for the porch swing to creak again, and added, Expect remediation tonight. Try service first, I said. That won't be necessary, he said. You're wrong, I said, but it felt like I was saying it to the dust lit up in the sun. He turned at the door and gave me a look I'd seen on hall monitors in 1979 and assistant managers in 2004, authority on layaway. The clipboard closed with a plastic clap. He put the notice to his chest like a hymn book, and the porch swing chain sang the last note for him. I watched him cross the drive, shoulders squared for a job he didn't understand, and listened to his shoes crunch the grit where the concrete meets the world. My coffee had gone cold. I took a sip anyway. Quiet isn't consent, I told the chrome. It's me counting facts. I set the mug down, tucked the deed folder under my arm, and took one more photo of the boundary pin before the light shifted. Then I locked the garage and stood a moment, eyes closed, hearing only the lake, the chain and the soft click of a plan coming together by inches instead of inches lost. The porch swing creaked once more. Out by the hedgerow, a small bird shot up, startled by nothing I could see. I opened my eyes to the empty drive, the nowhere of a Saturday morning that had somehow become a countdown. Behind me, the clipboard had the last word. Clap. The post office counter glass carried 100 small scratches that turned morning light into a pale fog. The postmaster slid a folded plat across it with 2 fingers, the paper's blue lines neat as a quilt. County plat, he said. Stamped. You said you wanted the lakeside boundary. I want the truth, I said. He rotated the sheet so north faced me. Lot 26, Subdivision 3. Look here, survey pin coordinates. If you're standing at that hedgerow pin you photographed your setback line runs, here. He traced a pencil along a line that put my uncle's cabin clean inside the margin. I pulled a printout from my pocket, the one the teenage rep had quoted like scripture. HOA diagram shows the line here, I said, laying it beside the plat. The HOA sketch looked like it had been drawn after a long meeting and a short memory. He didn't look up. That's a homeowner association sketch. This is the county plat. He tapped the embossed seal at the corner. See, that raised. Stamped. Can I get a certified copy? $2 a page, he said. You want the full book scan or just this sheet, and a photo of me holding it for my records? He laughed through his nose. You sound like a clerk. I used to be one, I said. Mail, not maps. We both heard it then, the soft metal tick of the flag rope against the mast outside, slow and even the kind of rhythm that sets your shoulders back, whether you notice or not. He made the copy. The machine whirred like it was chewing gravel. I breathed through my teeth and kept the HOA diagram in my peripheral vision like a stray dog that might bite. Who told you the HOA line didn't match? He asked. A kid, I said. With a clipboard. Kids are good at clipboards. He's good at walking into garages, I said. He slid the copy through the pass slot. The paper was warm. I rubbed my thumb across the county seal and felt the little ridges. Paper talks loudest when stamped, I said mostly to myself. What was that? Nothing. Just agreeing with you. The bulletin board behind him was a patchwork of lost cat notices, bake sale dates, choir rehearsal times, a flyer for a lakeside consultation about liability near the public path. I pointed to it. "Who posted that HOA secretary?" he said. "Came in last week. Asked about the legal way to announce things without certified mail. And you told her." "If it needs to hold up," he said, "send the mail. Posting a notice is good for eyes, not for court." I nodded and slid a manila folder onto the counter. Deed on top, smooth from hands older than mine. "Could you look up if any temporary orders on the docket? They keep saying something about an TTRO." He lifted a brow. "Temporary restraining order. They like their letters. I'll call over." He picked up the phone and spoke in that slow, careful register clerks adopt when they want truth more than speed. "Hey, Linda. It's Gary at the post office. Got a gentleman asking if there's a TTRO on Lot 26 Subdivision 3. He covered the receiver and mouthed, "County Clerk." I kept my hands on the counter and watched the rope tap the mast. Tap, tap, like the world insisting on patience. People came in and out behind me. One woman asking for international forms, a man with a stack of wedding invitations. Paper everywhere, moving toward meaning. Gary listened, eyes flicking to me once. "Right, No, just asking status." Thanks, Linda." He hung up and leaned toward the glass. "Draft filed awaiting signature. Not executed. It's in the queue." "Tonight?" I asked. He frowned. "She didn't say. Just that it's not signed." The door swung and the bell chimed. The HOA secretary stepped in like someone who knew the scuff level of every tile. She pretended not to see me, then changed her mind. "Morning, Rick." "Morning," I said. She held up a printed email thread like a peace offering. "Per the board," she said, and even she seemed tired of saying it. "We're standardizing notices. Here's the language." She slid it under the glass to Gary, careful not to look at the county seal in my hand. I read over her shoulder. Terms like hazard remediation accessory structure special assessment had been dropped in like stones. At the bottom, a bolded line, overnight remediation window applies. Another footer note. Attachment TTRO draft. Why is the attachment a draft? I asked. She pressed her lips together. The board's counsel said it would be signed before action, and if it isn't... She studied the stamp on my copy like it was a sunset she couldn't stop. Then action should wait. "Will it?" I asked. She didn't answer. The flag rope tapped and tapped until the silence felt full. Gary cleared his throat. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, certified letters go a long way." She nodded. "I told them." I slid my phone across the counter. "Would you mind if I take a photo of you handing me the plat?" "Just to look official when this gets informal." Gary smiled. "Go on, then." He held the sheet by its corners. I snapped the picture. "Send that to yourself and to anyone you trust," he said. I emailed it to me, to my cousin Tom, to Uncle Harold, who still reads his messages like a man reading weather reports. The secretary fiddled with the email printouts as if shuffling them might change the words. "Look," she said, lowering her voice. "I shouldn't say this, but the board hired a consultant. They push timelines. They say weekends are best for limited exposure." Limited exposure to what I asked. "Neighbors," she said. "People film. They should," I said. She swallowed. If Tom wants to send a note to council, include the stamped plat. It's harder to bulldoze stamps." "Bulldoze?" I said. "I didn't mean... It's all right." I folded the plat into my folder and slid the HOA email behind it like a shadow. "Thanks for the honesty." She nodded, grateful I hadn't said her name. A man in a ball cap entered with a stack of packages and held the door long enough for the rope outside to change its rhythm. The tap became a faster tick breeze picking up across the little square. I felt the seconds gather into something like a countdown. Gary leaned back to the phone again without prompting. "Let me try Linda one more time," he said. "Sometimes she gets a timestamp." He waited through 2 rings, then 3. His eyes landed on the clock above the stamp machine. "Lunch hour," he muttered, and then Linda came back on quick. He listened and scribbled a number. When he hung up, he dropped his voice enough that only me and the secretary could hear. There's a signature block set for this evening. If it gets signed, the system will flag it after business hours. What time? I asked. He glanced at the note. 7. He breathed in like the building did, slow and square. Then he leaned closer, glass between us, not big enough to stop worry. Order tonight, he whispered. My mouth felt dry as paper. I nodded once. Then I'll get this to where it belongs. I tucked the copy and emails into the folder, pressed the crease so the seal would leave a ridge on the next page, and turned toward the door. The flag rope hit the mast twice more, tap, tap, like a tiny hammer, promising to keep time whether or not anyone listened. Behind me, Gary called out without looking up, as if answering a question I hadn't had the courage to ask. If they call it remediation, make sure they can spell enforcement. Will do, I said, and the bell chimed again as I stepped out into the light, the lake air smelling like damp leaves and old promises. The bulletin board notices fluttered in the draft. I paused, thumbed my cousin's contact, and felt the thread of my own patience go taut. Pending, I thought. Not signed. Pending. The rope tapped in the breeze, steady as a heartbeat you hear when you're holding your breath. I headed for the truck. Tom arrived with the diner doorbell and a gust of coffee air. He didn't sit so much as hinge into the booth tie, already loosened voice pitched for the empty space between us. Bring every sheet, he said. We start now. I slid the manila folder across the formica. He flipped the clasp with a thumbnail and spread the contents like a blackjack dealer. County plat copy, the HOA diagram. The overnight notice, my photo of the boundary pin. Good, he said. Chain of custody time stamps on the pin photos. Phone camera embeds them, I said. Filed backups to email. He nodded, eyes scanning. The jukebox behind him clicked to the end of a song and stalled on a quiet breath before the next track found its groove. The pause filled the booth with its own kind of proof. He set his coffee down without drinking. HOA is leaning on the word remediation. We counter with service failure and boundary conflict. You have the deed. I laid the top page out, embossed. You can feel the seal. He did thumb, running the raised edge. We'll need a clerk's affidavit to authenticate. The diner owner glided over, pot in hand. Top off, counselor, please, Tom said, and a refill for the man who brought me homework. I smiled and took a sip that tasted like the same brand they've poured here since Gerald Ford, hot and honest. On the wall near the door, the church choir sign-up sheet curled at the corners. A pen hung from a loop of string that always tangled no matter who fixed it. Tom tapped the HOA diagram. This sketch is sloppier than a yard sale. We need their actual bylaw site. I pulled a printed page from the stack. Bylaw excerpt. Section 4.2.7, a lot about accessory structures and hazard mitigation near public thoroughfares. He read aloud, kept to 2 sentences like a man who'd broken himself of bad habits. Accessory structures within setback areas shall be subject to corrective action when documented hazards exist. Remediation windows may be scheduled to minimize community disruption. He grunted. Language meant to sound like authority, not law. They're saying the cabin is a hazard, I said. They're saying everything is a hazard if it helps them move fast, Tom said. But a draft TTRO isn't an order. County plat beats HOA crayon art. We'll get an injunction if they lay a hand on the property. Tonight, I said. He looked up. You have a time. 7. Clerk said signature block set. He took a breath that made his shoulders square and his eyes soften. Then our window is smaller than the coffee we're drinking. The jukebox ticked again. A country song slid in the steel guitar, something about front porches and promises. Tom reached for a napkin, drew a little rectangle, and framed it with arrows. This is your cabin. Here's the pin. We need sightline photographs from the pin to the cabin where the setback would cross. Mark the angles on printouts. Date on the back. Get a witness if you can. Neighbor, I said. Neutral if possible. And I want your emails forwarded to a fresh account. We'll print headers. He looked at me. Headers matter. They fix time. Kind men keep receipts, I said. Tom smiled, small and proud. Say that again for the record. Kind men keep receipts. Put it in the statement. Judges remember lines like that. The diner owner set down a plate of pie we didn't order. On the house, she said. Heard about the cabin. Folks are talking. Rick, you want a box later, I'll earn it, I said. Tom slid her a business card. If you saw HOA trucks near the lake last month, write it down. A date, a time, anything strange. I remember the vests, she said. They walked in like they owned the shoreline. Write it tonight, Tom said. Signed. She nodded and moved down the counter, refilling sugar jars, the clink of lids like punctuation. Tom returned to the stack. Now the email thread. He tapped the printout the secretary had pushed under the post office glass. We'll quote the footer. Attachment TTRO draft. That word is our friend. He said, remediation window applies, I said. He can say the sky applies. The clerk's docket decides. He anchored the bylaw excerpt with his palm and lowered his voice. We proceed in 3 steps. 1. Notice the board and the clerk you contest any action absent a signed order. 2. Submit an emergency motion for temporary injunction if they so much as tape a sign. 3. Prepare a motion to freeze accounts if we establish bad faith. Freeze their assets, I asked, quiet. If they're playing shell games with assessments and consultant contracts, yes, he said. It's surgical. We don't punish neighbors. We stop a board. The jukebox ticked again track, change a breath between choruses. In the booth behind me, 2 farmers debated whether rain counts if it falls after sundown. The choir sign-up sheet fluttered when someone opened the door. My phone buzzed across the table. Uncle Harold's name lit up old letters that always make me sit straighter. I answered on speaker, and Tom lifted a finger for silence without looking annoyed, which is how I knew he was listening like a lawyer and a cousin. Harold Rickey, he said. Men are on the trail. What men I can't see from the porch, he said. Clipboards. The way they walk, you know that walk. Tom mouthed neighbors. I shook my head. Do you hear trucks, I asked. Just voices, he said. Tape pulling off a roll that sound, and someone measuring like a metal tape hitting a stake. Dusk makes them brave. We're coming by after this, I said. Stay inside. Don't let them take anything he said soft enough to land behind my ribs. The line rustled, then steadied. You always were good with paper, son. Make it count. I will, I said. He hung up. The pie cooled between us, forgotten. Tom clicked the pen. Mini plan. You'll print 2 copies of each artifact. 1 binder for you, 1 for me. Photo log angles, distances, pin to corner. I'll draft a notice to the clerk and the board before 7. We'll timestamp the send. Will we need a statement from the secretary, I asked. If she's willing, he said. But don't pressure her. We use what we have stamped plat bylaw excerpt email headers, pin photos. Tonight is about standing between the cabin and a misuse of process. He set the bylaw excerpt down and smoothed it once with his palm like he was smoothing out a wrinkle in the day. Rick, he said, and his voice left the law and found our family. I know what they took from you when they cuffed you last winter on that mail fraud they never pursued. This is different. We're not improvising. We're documenting. I hear the rope against the mast, I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He had grown up with that rope, too. He glanced at the clock. You have 3 hours. I gathered the papers like a man pulling in a net. The folder felt heavier with the stamp marks as if each emboss carried a little weight of its own. Tom slid out of the booth and squared his shoulders. The jukebox clicked through another breath, then a hymn found its first chord in the speakers soft enough to balance the coffee smell. Text me the first batch in 30 minutes, he said, then hourly. I'll get the angles. And, Rick. Yeah. Don't hand anyone a key no matter how official they sound. I've learned that lesson. We stepped toward the door together. The bell chimed. The choir sheet lifted and fell. Tom drifted toward his car. I aimed for mine and felt the folder edge bite into my palm, a little reminder to keep my grip. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice, low and urgent. They're moving the pin, she said. You didn't hear it from me. Watch the hedgerow at dusk. The line went dead. At 3:15, the DVR's green timestamp stuttered across the screen. I'd left the system running after Tom insisted we archive every hour. The fan hummed steady as a ceiling vent, filling the garage with its own breath. On the monitor, 2 silhouettes near the cabin, thin shapes caught by motion floodlight, each step caught in grainy monochrome. I rewound. Played again. Same stride, same angle toward the post by the north edge. They bent, then straightened. The HOA kept saying hazardous structure, but here were bodies on tape moving after midnight. And the county clerk had told Tom the TTRO still sat unsigned on the docket. On the workbench, my diner cup from last night cooled to a chalk ring. I hadn't tossed it, too busy replaying angles. The bulletin board notice I'd pulled from the clubhouse last week leaned against the wall, thumbtack still clinging to the corner language about overnight remediation teams. The cabin roof glowed pale in the footage. Then, the smaller silhouette pulled something from a satchel. White dust or spray shot under the floodlight. The camera caught the gesture and then a quick bend. I slowed playback. On the fence post, a crude X bloomed under the beam. My hand tightened on the mouse. The X wasn't random. It was a marker meant to look official. I printed a still frame, set it beside the portal screenshot Tom had emailed me, county site still reading draft temporary take remediation order unsigned. That word, draft, glared back like a stoplight nobody saw. Truth keeps better hours than vandals, I muttered. The DVR fan hummed again louder now, as if underlining the point. Outside, morning slid up behind the lake. When I finally walked to the fence post, the chalk line was damp from dew, but legible enough. Paint dust clung to the grass. The staging wasn't rumor anymore, it left its initials. Dawn found me halfway down the lake road with my blinker still ticking like a metronome for a turn I'd already taken. The trees parted, and there it was, an empty rectangle of splinters where Uncle Harold's cabin used to sit. A backhoe idled beside the stump field exhaust, rising in a patient ribbon. The machine operator had his hands folded like it was a break between hymns. I pulled over on the gravel shoulder and stepped out. The smell hit first wet ash and pine sap. A gull circled once disinterested. I lifted my phone and took the first photo from the lake trail sign, making sure the timestamp layered over the pale smoke. Another from the hedge line where the boundary pin leaned. Another straight on where the front door had framed 100 Saturday afternoons. A man in a windbreaker with an HOA badge clipped low on his belt waved a single page like a waiter with the bill. "Compliance violation," he said. "Accessory structure removed per remediation window." Per what window? My voice sounded wrong and my own mouth too even. He tapped the footer. Overnight. Authorized. I hovered my phone over the page and shot the violation slip, then took one of his shoes in the mud, the backhoe in the background, the empty space. He rolled his eyes, but the lens kept doing its quiet work. "You can tear wood." "Not truth," I said. He pretended not to hear me. "Do you have any questions about the assessment?" "Only about the law," I said. A car door thudded behind me. Uncle Harold shuffled across the gravel in his wool hat, chin lifted the way he does when he's trying to keep a tremor out of his voice. He didn't look at the badge. He walked to the edge of the foundation and crouched. His hand rested on a charred timber and trembled so slightly you'd have to be family to see it. He didn't say a word. The church bell up the hill carried a thin echo that felt like a long-distance apology. The windbreaker man cleared his throat. "Sir, you can't be inside the cordoned area." "We're not," I said. "We're on our land." "That's under dispute," he said. "By who?" Harold asked softly, and with what proof board authority the man said. I opened the manila folder and slid out the deed. The seal's raised circle caught the bleached light. "Chain of title," I said. "County plat confirms the pin line. Covenants run with the land," he repeated like he'd been trained to say only 7 things. "Covenants don't nullify deeds," I said. "They coexist." The backhoe idled on, indifferent. 2 neighbors stood on the lake trail with paper cups and the tight expressions people wear when they want to help but don't want to be seen helping. One lifted his phone, then lowered it when the windbreaker looked his way. A patrol car rolled in slow tires, whispering on the gravel. The deputy, who'd handled last winter's mail theft case, stepped out hat low. He nodded to me like a man who recognizes an address more than a person. "Morning," he said. "We've had reports of interference." "From who?" I asked. "Board," he said. "This is an official remediation. Where's the signed order?" "Notice is posted," he said. I held up the deed again. "Notice isn't an order." He shifted his weight. "Let's keep it easy. It would be easier," I said, "if the law came before the bulldozer." Harold stood slowly, palm blackened. He wiped it on his jacket without looking down. "Deputy," he said, "I taught half your cousins to fish at that dock. I've replaced every stair on that porch with these hands. I remember Mr. Harold," the deputy said. "This isn't personal. It is to me." A second man with a clip-on ID approached this one with a clipboard and the quick board handwriting of someone tallying a warehouse. He pointed the pen at my pocket. "Keys to the accessory structure." "It isn't an accessory," I said, "and there is no structure left." "Keys," he repeated as if the word worked on ruins. I took a photo of his lanyard instead. The deputy looked relieved to have something to call an action. "Sir," he said gently, "you need to step back beyond the tape. We're not past the pin," I said. "Let's not argue pins," he said. "Please." "Argue?" Harold's voice went rough. "We're asking a question with an answer." The wind picked up off the lake and turned the ash smell sideways. I pocketed my phone and stepped back the distance he wanted. The windbreaker man, seeing space open between us, brightened like a sun lamp. "Thank you for cooperating," he said. "Now." 3 things happened in a crooked row. The clipboard man scribbled a number and walked toward the backhoe with his hand up like a parade marshal. The deputy glanced at the patrol car, then at my folder. And a third, HOA volunteer college-aged, polite face brought a plastic bin marked personal effects to the tape and set it down as if that made something right. "Those are mine," Harold said. "Anything inside the remediation boundary is inventoried for later pickup," the volunteer said. "You'll get a receipt." I leaned toward the bin. It held a thermos, a jar of screws, a photo frame with a faded snapshot of my aunt standing on the porch a month before she passed. The volunteer shifted block and tackle careful. "Receipt," I said. "Now." He fumbled in his pocket and handed me a carbon copy pad. The lines waited. I wrote each item, date, time, and added the phrase taken during disputed action. I took a photo of the filled page, then a second of the volunteer's shoes and the tape edge. The deputy moved closer, palms open. "Rick?" "I'm asking you to lower the temperature. It's 61, I said. "We're fine." The windbreaker man sighed into his collar. "If he continues this, we'll need him removed." "Removed for what?" I asked. "Obstruction," he said. I looked at the deputy. "On what statute?" He glanced at the backhoe, which coughed smoke and settled into silence. "Let's step aside," he said. The way he gestured made it clear he was about to make this official whether or not the law agreed. I felt the day tilt. "Tom's on his way," I said. "Then he can meet you downtown," the deputy said. He sounded tired enough to be honest. "I'm going to ask you to turn around." I did. The cuffs were colder than I remembered, or maybe that was the wind. Harold stepped in, eyes hot but voice steady. "I'll go with him. You can follow," the deputy said. As they led me toward the car, Tom's sedan slid in the crooked door already open. He kept his distance like a man hugging a line drawn in chalk. "Rick," he called voice level, "say nothing but your name. I'll file." "File what?" the deputy asked, brisk now. "An injunction," Tom said. And, if this was done without an order, a motion to freeze board accounts. The clipboard man winced at freeze the way a person does when a word knows their address. The deputy settled me into the back seat. Tom leaned closer to the open window, keeping his hands visible. "We can do this tonight," he said. "But you have to give me the cleanest record possible. I've got photos," I said. "Timestamps. The pin. And the slip," he asked. "In my pocket," I said. He nodded once. "File or fold," he said, voice dropping to that pitch where only family and resolve live. "Say it back." "File," I said. The door shut. The car smelled like vinyl and last week's cologne. Through the glass, I watched Harold touch that blackened timber again as if it were a headstone and a memory at once. The bell up the hill rang the half hour. A gull landed where the porch used to be and looked around puzzled. Booking my belt and folder went into separate trays. A clerk with a neutral face read a script about conditions and signatures. I answered my name. Tom's card slid into my palm like a promise when no one was watching. After whatever the county calls a sandwich, an officer I hadn't met before walked me down a short hallway to a line of benches and left me there. The bar across the little square of window made a cross on the floor. Tom's face appeared beyond the bars a while later, hair out of place for maybe the first time in 10 years. He didn't say hello. "Injunction goes in an hour," he said. "Judge on call is fair, but they'll offer you a plea. What kind? Small fine, no admission. You walk, and the cabin." He held my eyes. "Gone. And the board. If you take the plea, they'll call it resolved." He let the silence lay down between us and smooth itself like a sheet. Then he leaned closer, lowered his voice to a whisper that still carried the shape of a gavel. "Your choice. Rick injunction or plea." I breathed once and tasted ash that wasn't here. Somewhere far away, the church bell started another climb. I closed my eyes and saw the deed seal, felt the ridges under my thumb, heard the plastic snap of a teenager's clipboard. When I opened them, Tom was still there waiting. The courtroom smelled like wet coats and old paper. Rain tracked down the tall windows in nervous strings. Tom stood beside me at counsel table, the deed open like a hymn book between us, its embossed seal catching the gray light. The gallery creaked as people settled onto oak benches, the kind that insist on posture and patience. I spotted Gary, the post office clerk, half hidden behind a pillar, hands folded like he'd taken a number. The judge glanced over the docket glasses. "Counsel, I've reviewed the filings." Tom kept his voice gentle. "Your Honor, the county plat places the cabin within the setback." The HOA proceeded without a signed order. Their own emails referred to a draft. He touched 2 documents with the same precise finger, the stamped plat and a printed email header. He let them sit there like squares on a chessboard. The HOA lawyer adjusted his tie with professional annoyance. The board acted within the covenants to remediate a hazardous accessory structure. Notice was posted at the clubhouse and on the lake trail. Posted, Tom said, isn't service. And a draft, TTRO, isn't a signature. The judge's gaze lifted to mine. "Mr. Alton, did you receive certified notice?" "No, Your Honor," I said. A teenager walked into my garage with a clipboard. A small exhale moved through the benches, half shock, half recognition. The judge scribbled something. Outside, the rain turned from strings to mist. "Clerk," the judge said, "what is the status of any temporary order in this matter?" The county clerk at the side table consulted her screen. The record reflects a draft entered unsigned. "Thank you." The judge shifted his attention to the HOA side. "Counsel, what compelled immediate demolition?" "Remediation windows are scheduled to minimize community disruption," the lawyer recited like an elevator voice. "And minimize due process," the judge asked, not unkindly. Gary coughed once in the gallery, swallowed it, and went back to looking like a man who knows the price of stamps and silence. Tom slid the deed toward the clerk. She examined the seal, ran a thumb over it, and nodded. "We've also moved," Tom said, "for an order securing the site and prohibiting further transfer or dissipation of HOA funds, pending review." The HOA treasurer in the second row twisted a ring. The board chair stared at a patch of carpet as if it contained a loophole. The judge set down the pen. When he spoke, the rhythm of his words took on weight as if the room itself had been waiting to hear them. "Temporary injunction is hereby granted." The sound landed like a door closing softly and finally. A breath released from the benches. The rain, as if listening for permission, slowed and then stopped, leaving water drops poised on the glass like punctuation. The judge continued one measured sentence at a time. "The HOA is restrained from further alteration of the subject property. The bailiff will supervise placement of a padlock at the site entrance with keys to be held by the court. The deed is authenticated for preliminary purposes." Tom's hand tapped once on the table. No flourish, just acknowledgement. He caught my eye. I didn't try to smile. I felt the edges of the day adjust. The HOA lawyer started again, seeking a foothold. "Your Honor, Any order restricting funds would cripple operations, routine expenses, groundskeeping utilities. "We are not at funds yet," the judge said. "We are at law." The bailiff approached with a stack of forms like he was bringing bread. Tom signed where he needed to, then pressed the pen into my palm. "Your initials by the plat reference," he murmured. My letters looked steady. The clerk stamped our copies with a clack that echoed more than it should have. I took the injunction copy and slid it into the folder. It felt heavier than its weight. "Ink can stop bulldozers." I thought, then said it quietly, almost to the paper. "Ink can stop bulldozers." Tom nodded a quick smile, finding the corner of his mouth. "Keep saying that." The judge peered over the frames one last time. "We'll reconvene on the question of board financial practices if necessary. Counsel, comport yourselves accordingly." He rapped the gavel once, not loud. Somehow, that made it more real. Outside, the rain gave up entirely. In the narrow hall, the air tasted like old varnish and coffee from a machine. The bailiff intercepted us and lifted an envelope. "Lock order," he said, tapping the flap. "I'll meet you at the site. Court holds the master." "Keys?" I asked. "2 duplicates," he said. "One for your uncle to carry, one for your counsel to hold in trust. You'll both sign the log." He tucked the envelope back under his arm with a courtesy you don't see on television. Down the hall, Gary stepped out from the gallery door. Rick. His voice was quiet, the way you talk to someone who has just set down a heavy thing. "I brought the stamp number if the judge needed it. Thanks," I said. "Seeing you in there helped." "Post offices are funny," he said. "People think we handle mail. We really handle proof." "Proof helps," I said. Tom checked his watch. "We have an hour before the bailiff's shift change. Let's get to the lake." As we moved toward the exit, the HOA treasurer brushed past, head down, a calculator of a man. He didn't see me at first. When he did, the apology didn't reach his eyes. He muttered to the board chair, not quite under his breath, "Funds are already tied." Tom's eyebrows ticked up the smallest degree. The words looked for a place to hide and didn't find one. He put a gentle hand on my sleeve and steered me away. "He didn't mean to say that out loud," Tom said. "But he did. What does it mean?" "It means by the time of the demolition they'd committed money somewhere it doesn't belong," he said. "Consultants, shells, or just panic." We stepped into the light. The courthouse steps shone. Puddles lay like coins. For a second the town smelled like petrichor and a morning forgiven. The bailiff came out behind us, adjusted his cap to keep sun out of his eyes, and nodded toward the parking lot. "You gentlemen ready?" "At your pace," Tom said. We trailed him through the square. The flag hung quiet. As we crossed, a woman from the choir waved from under the eaves. "We're praying you get your place back," she called, then looked embarrassed at the word praying in public and half laughed it away. "Thank you," I said. "We're working on the paper part." The bailiff's cruiser led the way, tires hissing on the last of the water my truck tucked behind. At the site, the backhoe sat where it had in the morning like a dog that didn't understand why it was in trouble. The tape sagged. The wind off the lake had shifted. The ash smell was thinner now, or maybe I was breathing differently. The bailiff unfolded the order on the truck hood and clicked his pen. "We place the lock, we record the time." He pointed to the chain at the service gate. "You sign here. Counsel signs as custodian." Tom did his part. I wrote my name slowly, not to savor it, but to anchor it. The bailiff fitted the lock with a small sound that still felt like a chord. He handed me a key, then another to Tom. "Court retains master," he said. "Any access is through me or the clerk." Harold arrived as we were finishing hat, still on face older today than yesterday. He put a palm on my shoulder and looked at the chain. "Does this mean they can't touch it?" he asked. "It means they need law to try again," Tom said. Harold nodded. His hand dropped to the key in my palm as if checking it for weight. He didn't take it. He just let his fingers rest there for a beat. "Feels right," he said. He looked up at the sky. Rain knew when to stop. We were halfway to our cars when the HOA lawyer's sedan pulled in tight tires, spitting a last little tantrum. He climbed out and tried for a cordial smile that didn't make the trip to his eyes. "Counsel," he said to Tom. "We'll be filing to modify." Tom returned the smile genuine and a touch weary. "File away." The treasurer stayed in the passenger seat, phone pressed to his cheek. He covered the mic poorly. I heard transfer contingency and the word liquidity said like a prayer and a dare. Tom didn't break stride. "Rick," he said low, "don't take calls tonight. You don't recognize. Don't answer the door to anyone who says the word inspection without a badge. And if a neighbor mentions a sudden dues increase, write down the language. Because if they start moving money and changing assessments before the hearing, we're not just talking injunctions," he said. He opened his door and looked across the roof at me. "We're talking frozen funds." The wind lifted once off the lake and then lay down. I closed my fist over the key and felt the teeth press my skin, small, specific, not symbolic at all. The clubhouse smelled like coffee pots that had worked a double shift and casserole pans cooling under paper foil. Folding chairs turned toward the podium, their metal backs shining like a kind of penance. Bulletin boards on both walls were layered with fresh notices. Refund process. Read this first meeting agenda, special assessment hold. The word hold had a gravity you could feel in your knees. Tom stood by the side aisle, suit coat off, tie loosened just enough to look like he belonged to the room instead of floating above it. He nodded once when he saw me and then turned his eyes back to the front table where the treasurer and board chair sat with their hands folded over papers that had finally learned how to tell the truth. The treasurer cleared his throat into a microphone that popped before it settled. I have an announcement." His voice had lost the iambic certainty it wore in email. "An independent audit has been completed. The result shows irregularities in consultant payments totaling into 6 figures. He swallowed, looked at his hands, and then forced the next words out like nails. "Funds will be returned." No one moved. The room didn't hold its breath so much as set it down gently on the carpet and step back. The applause didn't start with a person. It started with a sound, a single chair leg scraping, and then palms met palms and rose into a wave that filled the ceiling. It ran for a count of 3, then stopped all at once as if we had rehearsed. Community silence can roar. Tom eased forward to the mic. "There are copies of the audit sheet on the front table," he said. "Take 1 per household. Attached is a schedule for distributing refund checks today for those present, certified mail for those who can't attend." He held up a stack of envelopes with court stamps in the corner. The treasurer kept his eyes on the table. The board chair stared straight ahead. I stood near the bulletin board where someone had pinned a printout of the county plat beneath the refund notice boundaries, underlined in highlighter the little orange square of the survey pin drawn in with a careful hand. A child had added a stick figure next to it, grinning and holding a flag. The boundary pin had earned a place on the wall like a family photo. Tom continued, voice low enough to require listening. "I will not dwell on past emails. You've read them. What matters now is process. The court's injunction remains in effect. Keys are logged. The board has agreed to accept a financial monitor until this is fully resolved." He glanced at the treasurer, who nodded once, inch by inch. A neighbor in a green windbreaker raised his hand. Do we get an apology?" The treasurer leaned toward the mic. "I'm sorry," he said, and you could tell he'd practiced the sentence without ever practicing the feeling. "We failed to follow proper procedures. We followed advice that prioritized speed over service." Another hand, this one from the woman who organizes choir potlucks. "And the special assessment," suspended the board chair said, reading directly from a line Tom had likely written for him. "We will not move forward without a member vote. All notices will be certified." Tom stepped back to the mic once more. "If you were charged late fees or penalties related to these irregular actions, those will be reversed." He looked up at the room. "Bring your statements to the table after the meeting. We'll log each one." He ceded the floor. The treasurer gestured to a volunteer to begin passing the envelopes down the aisles. The first refund checks moved through hands like warm bread. People smiled without showing teeth, the way you smile when you want to be grateful but your body hasn't caught up. The aromas of tuna noodle and baked ziti carried from the back counter lids clinking as someone checked temperatures like that mattered now. I drifted to the side table where the audit sheet lay under a paperweight shaped like a lighthouse. Columns of numbers showed consultant fees, expedited remediation services, communications retainers, each with a red note, non-compliant to be reimbursed. My finger traced one line that matched the morning the backhoe had idled beside absence. "Rick," someone said behind me. I turned to find the elder from Lakeshore Drive, the one who once told me to cut my hedges shorter because the HOA likes the feeling of seeing around corners. His cap was in his hands. He looked down at it first, then up at me. "We were wrong about you," he said. It landed like water where drought had been. He lifted his chin, added, "I'm sorry for my part." "Thank you," I said. It was the only honest sentence available. Tom joined us with a clipboard and a new kind of energy his courtroom voice traded for the tone he used at family reunions when he assigned who brought what. Name and address, he asked the elder pen ready. The elder gave both. Tom wrote them carefully, then attached a sticky to the man's envelope so the line would move with precision. He turned to the bulletin board and pinned a one-page handout titled, "Next Steps, the Bullet Points Tidy. Maintain injunction compliance. Attend special meeting for bylaw revisions. Return survey flags to original positions. Report tampering. Volunteer for the Financial Oversight Committee. At the bottom in smaller type community BBQ on the lawn next week. Bring a dish. Bring patience." Someone laughed softly at that last line and then pretended they hadn't, but the sound helped. Across the room, the board chair leaned into his microphone again. "We will schedule nominations for new treasurer next month. In the interim, the financial monitor will countersign all disbursements." He looked like a man translating from a language he didn't speak into a language that didn't want his accent. A boy and his mother reached the table, and Tom knelt a little to be eye level. "This is a refund of the special assessment you paid," he said, sliding the envelope across. "We're sorry for the trouble." The boy grinned and bounced on his heels. The mother nodded and pressed the envelope to her chest like a library book overdue to hope. The room warmed in tiny increments. A potluck volunteer lifted a lid. "We'll serve after the vote," she called, and 3 people applauded the idea of order, which was a kind of miracle. I glanced back at the bulletin board. The Platt copy rustled under the AC vent, the drawn-on pin bright as a new button. Someone had pinned a photo of Harold smiling on the cabin steps, a caption scrawled in black marker, "Harold's Place We Remember." I stood still and let the applause ripple, then let it vanish. There is a sound between sound and silence that feels like a room agreeing. The treasurer approached me without the microphone eyes damp in a way I didn't distrust. "I know it's late," he said, "but if you need a letter for insurance about the demolition, I'll sign it myself. You can sign the check." I said, then softened. "We'll figure the rest out." He nodded. "We will." For a moment, no one spoke. Forks clicked softly against styrofoam like distant rain. Someone turned the thermostat down. The posters straightened themselves by sheer force of attention. Rick the elder said again nearer, now his hand light on my sleeve. "We were wrong about you." The repetition wasn't a mistake. It was the only way to measure a change of heart, to lay it down twice so the weight would hold. I looked across the room to Tom, who was answering 3 questions at once with the patience of a man counting to 10 and finding 11. He caught my eye, and we didn't need to say anything. When the board chair called for volunteers for the oversight committee, a half-dozen hands rose, some shy, some high. A retired math teacher, the potluck coordinator. Gary from the post office raised his too, and the room turned its head to him like a plant to light. "Thank you," the chair said, genuine for once. The hush returned for a beat, no clatter, no coughs. Just the sound of a shared exhale settling into the carpet. In that soft, deliberate quiet, the elder leaned close breath, carrying coffee and apology. "We were wrong about you," he whispered, "and we told our kids so." It was the only cliff this room needed, not a threat, not a reveal, but a correction. Said out loud, the kind that changes what tomorrow looks like. They pulled the canvas off the plaque like a curtain in a small-town theater. The brass flashed and then settled into itself, Harold's Cabin. Heritage restored. People clapped, not loud, not shy, just right for a Saturday that finally remembered its manners. Wind carried the choir's rehearsal from the church lawn, voices riding the air like swallows. Tom squeezed my shoulder and stepped back so Harold could move forward. My uncle touched the plaque the way you touch a name on granite, not superstitious, just careful with memory. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The flag rope clinked against the mast, one, two, as if to agree. Under a pop-up tent, the new board sorted envelopes. Refund distribution, read the sign, hand-lettered but neat. A line curved across the grass, everyone holding a slip of paper or a question. Smoke drifted from the barbecue pit where Frank from Maple Lane worked tongs with church basement authority. The picnic tables smelled like mustard and cedar. A kid sprinted past with a paper plate that tried to lift like a kite. Tom checked his watch and the stack of forms simultaneously. One at a time, he called soft enough to be obeyed without anyone feeling bossed. "Show your ID sign the ledger. Take your envelope." Gary from the post office had set up a folding table just for certified items that hadn't made it to their owners. "If you weren't here last week," he said, "you're here now." He stamped each receipt with a satisfying clack and handed out the envelopes like proof wrapped in paper. Rick, the treasurer, said, approaching with a guarded look that had learned humility. He offered a smaller brass plate, holes pre-drilled. "Boundary pin, do not remove it." Read, "We thought you might do the honors at the hedgerow." I turned it over in my hand. It was heavier than it looked. "We'll bolt it where everyone can see," I said. On the record, Tom added already fishing a screwdriver from a tote. A cheer rose near the clubhouse. Someone had repinned the bylaws, new copies, large print with a red stamp at the bottom. Amended by member vote, effective immediately. The crowd reacted like a room hearing a key change. I stood in the grass and let the sound move across me, a warm front after a stubborn winter. Folks, the board chair said into the mic, looking less like a chair and more like a neighbor, "We have checks today for anyone assessed during the irregular period. Interest included." He lifted a stack and nearly dropped it, which did more for his credibility than a speech would have. Laughter came gentle and forgiving. He found the rhythm and continued. "We're also forming the oversight committee tonight. There's a sign-up sheet under the bulletin board." I glanced at the mast. The rope kissed the pole again. The choir on the hill tried the harmony on a verse and got it right the second time. Somewhere, a bottle of lighter fluid puffed a small blue breath into the afternoon. Harold stood beside me, hat in hand. "You did it," he said. "We did it," I said. Tom came up with a small leather pouch, shook it like there might be dice inside, and spilled 2 new keys into my palm. The court tag dangled from each with a number typed neat as a hymn. "Duplicate set," he said. "Clerk signed off this morning." I weighed them and looked at Harold. "Your place," I said. He closed my fingers over the metal. "Our place," he said, and then, because the day had room for ceremony, added, "Open it after supper. Let the place breathe." A little girl in a red jacket tugged my sleeve. "Is the cabin coming back?" she asked. "It won't look exactly the same," I said, kneeling so we matched, "but it'll remember the shape." She nodded as if that made architectural sense. "My mom says you kept everything." "Not everything," I said. "Just what matters." She grinned, then darted toward the potato salad. Tom watched her go and spoke without looking at me. "You ready for a short speech?" "No," I said. "Good," he said. "That's exactly the right length." He tipped his head toward the mic. I walked to the little podium under the maple tree. The path there felt shorter than it used to. "I'm not much for speeches," I said, and the crowd did that friendly murmur people do when they see a truth they've met before. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to paper when the noise got louder than sense. Thank you for telling your kids we were neighbors first." I lifted the injunction copy, now creased at the edges from being shown so many times. "Ink can stop bulldozers," I said, holding it just long enough for people to hear the line twice, once with their ears and once with their relief. And today, the ink stands for us. Somebody started clapping at the wrong moment and then stopped embarrassed. I smiled at him to let him off the hook. "We'll put the boundary plate up this afternoon," I said. "If you see anyone moving pins, say something. If you get a notice, read the stamp. If someone knocks and says they're allowed to walk into your garage, ask them to spell service." Laughter. Not sharp, clean. And if you're making ribs, I added, glancing at Frank's pit, save me a corner piece. More laughter, then applause, then the hush that meant people were settling the moment inside themselves. Legacy is louder than demolition, I said. It wasn't the kind of line you shout. It was the kind you keep. We made our way to the hedgerow. A knot of neighbors followed plates in their hands like offerings. The pin still leaned a hair careful as an old man reading fine print. Tom held the new plate while I drove the screws. "Read it out," he said. I did. "Boundary pin, do not remove." Gary took a photo with the same seriousness he uses for passports. "For the bulletin board," he said. "Proof likes company, proof keeps company." I corrected, and he liked that. Back near the flagpole, the board chair and treasurer set up a folding table with a wide ledger. People queued up, some with jokes, some with quiet. "Sign here," the treasurer said to each, not hiding behind procedure anymore, just using it like a tool that builds instead of a tool that breaks. He handed Harold an envelope with his name typed large. Harold slid it into his jacket and didn't look at the amount. He didn't have to. The choir drifted down the hill and collected by the fence, trying out a benediction verse that didn't belong to any hymn I knew, but felt like one anyway. Their voices braided with the rope's clink and the low talk of neighbors sharing mayonnaise secrets. For a moment, the lawn felt like a porch, and the porch felt like home. Tom checked his phone, then his watch, and finally looked like a man without a clock for the first time in weeks. "We done?" he asked. "We're starting," I said. He patted his pocket for his key, then laughed. "Old habits." "Keep it," I said. "We trust you." A neighbor I'd barely spoken to came over, eyes wet, voice steady. "I told my boy we were wrong about you," she said. "He asked if we get a do-over." "We do," I said. She nodded, then stepped back into the line like she'd just taken the first step of a parade. Tom held out his palm. I placed one of the keys on it, teeth catching the light. The applause rose again without a signal. It climbed the flagpole and nested in the choir's chord. Harold touched my arm. "Go on," he said. "Take a ride around the loop. Make some noise that isn't paperwork." I swung a leg over the bike and eased it off the kickstand. The engine turned from silence to low prayer. I didn't gun it. I let it find the note the day had already chosen. People waved without stepping into the path. Kids shielded their plates automatically and laughed at themselves for doing it. I rolled past the flagpole, the rope-kissing metal in time with the idol. The applause followed me softer now, like waves against a dock, like something that would still be there when I looped back. I tipped 2 fingers off the grip toward the plaque, toward the pin, toward the faces that had practiced being neighbors, and decided to keep it. Behind me, the choir held a note a little longer than necessary, which was exactly necessary. The afternoon light settled over the lake as the brass plaque caught the sun and the flag rope clicked steady against the pole. Neighbors lingered with barbecue plates, refund envelopes tucked safely in their pockets while Harold's steady hand rested on the new key. For me, the sealed deed and the simple ceremony proved that our lines could be restored and our trust repaired. What had been broken by force was mended by notice, bylaw, and voice. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.